Okay, I saw a video by James Yeager titled "The 1911 Sucks." It's a part 1 and 2. This started a bunch of video responses. If you watch 1911 Sucks Part 2, it doesn't really fit the title in my opinion. But I don't want to sound like I'm a Glock hater either. That's what he was advocating for. I'm thinking of getting a Glock 17 or a USP 9mm. I'm not sure yet. I've got a revolver I might trade in, put a down payment, and grab one of the two. James claims the Glock is the best gun ever created. And I'm going to point out some flaws about Glock. But keep in mind, I'm thinking about getting one myself. I see a few videos where guys shoot a box of ammo or two to prove the 1911 is reliable, but it doesn't really prove anything in my opinion. It's not enough really to make a point. So I can either go out and buy the Glock now, buy a bunch of 9mm and 45, take them both out for a torture test, spend a lot of money, or I can talk some common sense. Because really I don't have that money to blow. If you Google broken 1911, you're going to get right under 27 million results. If you Google broken Glock, you'll get 3,200,000 votes, a little bit over that. Some people would just simply look at these numbers and say, aha, but not so fast. The 1911 design has been around for over 100 years. There are tons of old, unmaintained ones out there in that mix, you know. And there are 121 different manufacturers of the 1911. Glock is the only one that uses the Glock design. There's 121 manufacturers using the 1911 design. The 1911 is over 100 years old. The Glock is 30 years old. I'm going to leave a list of manufacturers for the 1911 in the description bar so you can look at this for yourself. Now, if this 1911 sucked, would it still be around after 100 years, over 100 years, being manufactured by 121 different companies? I don't think that would be happening. Some SWAT and Special Forces still use the 1911. Yeah, police and the Army use Glock. Okay? But again, SWAT and Special Forces. Lots of those guys choose to carry a 1911. Would SWAT choose a gun that 75% of the time works all the time and carry a 100-year-old flawed design with only 7 rounds because of their ego? Hell no. They choose the 1911 because it feels good in your hand. It feels natural. And the 45 is a man stopper. Think about it. They don't use 9mm, the Glock 17s. No. They'll take the 1911 with its 7 rounds. James said you can't use a 1911 for personal protection because they would not make it through one of his classes where they fire hundreds of rounds. Okay. Show me the ultimate badass that alone in a shootout with the Glock, a 1911, or any other handgun, and I guess a backpack full of ammo, walked out of that firefight, okay. No way, man. I don't care if you have RoboCop's gun. You're a dead man. On average, the number of rounds fired in the shootout is 3. And that's both ways. Total exchange. So that's not really realistic. Maybe you can't fire this thing all day, but you're not going to use it all day for self-defense either. He compared the Glock 17 with 17 rounds to a 1911 with 7 rounds. That's apples to oranges, 9mm to 45, but I'm going to dispute this point with his comparison. Have you guys seen the video of the cop who was killed by the combat vet with an M4? So guy he was a lunatic, he was defiant, screaming and cussing at the cop, and then he kills the poor cop for no reason. Alright, the cop had a Glock 17, it was a 9mm, 17 I believe, if I remember correctly. It's kind of a disturbing video. You can't see the cop get shot, but you can hear his screams. I talk about how shot placement is important. But this guy took a 9mm in the stomach and kept coming. Here's the 9mm Luger. This will go in and out, right? Maybe if the cop had 147 grain hollow point, that probably would have put the guy down. Probably if he had a 45, I think this would have done it. Put the guy down before the poor cop got killed. See the difference, and you can see why they call it a man stopper. Like I said, shot placement can be important, but also, you know, a 45 is like a sledgehammer. It'll knock you down pretty much no matter where it hits you. That's why SWAT carries the 1911. It feels natural in your hand, and even with 7 rounds, well, 7 rounds put 7 guys down. It's a big, beefy round. I said maybe if the cop had one of these two, he'd be okay. It may have ended differently. For those of you planning to use a handgun to save your life, concealed carry, I'm going to leave a link at the bottom in the description bar. If you're planning to carry, maybe you should look at it. Let it burn in your memory so you can learn from this tragedy. You may find it disturbing, but you need to realize shot placement is very important, especially with smaller caliber. You know, that it might save your life. I don't know. Maybe something can come from it. When the 1911 came out, it was put through a 6,000 round test and passed. In the meantime, the gun got so hot they had to dunk it in water to cool it down. Right. The Glock was put through a rapid fire test, and the recoil spring guide rod melted. I wouldn't trust a melted guide rod with my life. If I had to have a gun that I could dunk in water, I would take that. I mean, if need be, you know, if I'm in the middle of nowhere, I guess you could piss on it, cool it down, if your life depends on it. People say the Glock has a weird angle, and I have to agree with that. If I do buy a Glock, I'm just going to have to get used to it. I assume you can get used to just about anything. He said the original 1911 had an arched mainspring housing, so it had the same weird angle. And that's a flaw. And changing the flat spring housing to fix the flaw, you know, means it was flawed design to begin with. Well, he's wrong. If you look up original 1911 mainspring, or look for original on eBay, or a museum or something, they're flat. They were revised later to the arched. But, on that note, if a grip option is a flaw, then let me show you the flaw that my little plinker has. Look at that. What a flaw. I get an option of grips. If it was a perfect design, I wouldn't have that option, right? Does that make any sense? Oh no, look how they screwed up. I shouldn't have a choice. What about the new Glock Gen 4s with multiple back straps? Does he think that's a flaw too? If that's a flaw, so much for Glock perfection, huh? Either he set that to cover up the Glock's weird angle, or he thinks having an option is a flaw. So there should be no, all cars should be the same color, I guess. He also said when the 1911 first went out into service, they were unreliable. There were 5 manufacturers making 1911s for the military. I believe in the Philippines. Armscor, High Standard, maybe Rock Island. There were like 5. I don't remember all 5. But they're still out there. They were making 1911s with different specifications. It's like putting pieces together from different puzzles. I mean, come on, that's problems waiting to happen. It's like what happened with the M16. The government finds a good design, they test it for reliability, they approve it, and then they lower the quality to cheapen the cost and proceed to mass production. Big surprise, the government screwed up this design and the M16 like they screw up everything else. It wasn't the design, it was government screwing things up. I mean, it's them not mass producing what they found to be reliable in the first place. Also, I keep hearing, I know a guy who knows a guy who had a Glock for like 15, 20 years and never cleaned it, and it's never had a jam. Who in the hell recommends that? If your life is going to depend on it, you better know how to break it down, clean, and maintain it. You need to take care of it if it's going to take care of you. My HK here. That's a higher end gun than both the Glock and this 1911. Right? What do? When I come back from shooting it, I break it down, I clean it, and inspect it. Like a responsible gun owner should do. If you don't want to do that, that's okay, but I don't recommend anybody advocate that. Think about the parachute. When the parachute first came out, you think the guy that was going to test it, they just told him, hey, put this backpack on and pull the string and you'll be okay? Hell no. I bet he had all kinds of questions, man. I bet he's like, what's it made of? How do you put it together? How does it work? If your life depends on it, you better know how it works and how to maintain it. There is no perfect design, in my opinion. If there was, personally, I think it'd be probably the HK Mark 23. Big old Desert Eagle size 45. Set you back $2,300. It's a 45 made specifically for special forces. This is the baby brother. Right? And I customized it to fit my needs. I liked the trigger and extended magazine release of the tactical USP, but I didn't like the high sights that get caught in holsters and the threaded barrel which stuck out, which is you have to buy a protector, and it's more of a liability. You got to take it off. Be careful not to strip the threads when you put it back on. So I made a hybrid, right? Something that fits my needs. There's the match grade trigger, extended magazine release, right? Was there a flaw with this gun, or was it pretty close to what I wanted and I just tweaked it? I made it mine because my life depends on it. That's not a flaw. All right. Now, he was saying that a 1911, you might have to break it in with 500 rounds or so, as opposed to a Glock. That's true because of the polygonal barreling, like the HK. But really, if you think about it, who really cares? If you're going to use a handgun for self-defense, you need to go out and shoot it and get familiar with it, right? You've got to get a feel for it. You got to become a good shot. You don't just buy a gun, stick it in a holster, in a purse, or hide it in the crack of your ass and think you're good to go. By the time you're familiar with the 1911, your gun will be broke in and you'll be a fairly good shot, I think. Now, I know guys who have Glocks and none of them have their stock. They mount them with extended slide release, extended magazine release, sights, and of course the mainspring guide rod. So the plastic one won't break or melt. Probably some of the same mods I would do if I got one. But all guns break. They have moving parts and they deal with tremendous pressures. It's basically a controlled explosion. James tried to point out that the 1911 needs more maintenance. I cannot dispute that. I believe you need to learn to maintain and inspect your gun anyway. He talked about the 1911 flaws. He said it was not reliable. So let's talk about the Glock flaws, because he forgot to mention both the pros and cons, if he thinks it's the only reliable way to go. The only reliable way to go. First off, by his own logic, the Glock has a weird angle. Same as the 1911 with the revised 1991 A1 arched mainspring housing provision. Or a flaw by giving you an option for multiple back straps to choose from with the new Gen 4s. Right? I'm not going to create a straw man, so I'm just going to argue both points. Now, in my opinion, the Glock flaws, I see, the rest of them, keep in mind, I'm thinking about buying one too. Personally, I don't like the weird angle. You do get a higher bore axis. 1911 feels good in your hand, but the Glock, you do get a higher bore axis with the Glock. However, if you hold it too high, it can bite you. I've seen a few cuts at the range. Hell, one guy had a small chunk took out of the web of his hand. So if I get a Glock, I'm only firing that thing one-handed. All right. He didn't mention that. So if somebody's just not gonna be experienced with a gun, just buy it and stick it in their purse or get a holster and conceal it. Well, they need to know that, right? We don't want them freaking out if that happens to them. If you pull it out, there's a reason for it, and you can't get sidetracked. All right. Also, it's not uncommon to see a Glock with a cracked frame or broken frame rails. Some may not know this, but in 2002, Glock actually sold guns knowing they had defective frame rails. And then some of the new Glock Gen 4s were jamming on almost every shot because of, I forget, it was the defective extractors of the guide rod, but they had to have a massive recall or replacement program. Right? He didn't mention that. So he didn't say, if you get an older one, make sure it got revised or something. Just buy one and you're good to go. He didn't mention that, even though he's telling you can depend your life on it. Right? If I get one, I may leave the standard magazine release, but the cheap plastic recoil spring guide rod has to go. And I hate the slide release on the Glock. It's tiny, and I have small hands, so I'm going to modify that as well. When I have to take it to the range, and I'm going to have to break myself into that weird angle. Anyway, that's my opinion and additional information. James forgot to mention about the only gun he recommends you trust your life with? I don't think there is a right answer. I mean, I think this is right for me, right? I like this guy, but it's a little heavy. But that's the only issue with me. I shoot great with this damn thing. This cost me twice as much as this, and I love this grip angle much better. Right? It just feels so much more natural. It's a little bit blocky, but you know, hell, it's a good, reliable gun, and 12 rounds as opposed to 7. See, so this is right for me. So you got to find out what's right for you, and if you do go with his suggestion, keep in mind some of the points I talked about. Check for those modifications, make sure they got them, and decide for yourself.